Hello and welcome to our first webinar for the academic year of 2021 and 2022. This year we're kickstarting our webinars at CIGA with a very interesting conversation with a very qualified panel of experts and scholars on Afghanistan. First, let me introduce myself, and then I will introduce the webinar series. My name is Muhammad Awais Khan. I am a senior researcher at the Center for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. The webinar series at our center is designed to get behind important geopolitical events in our region, get behind the headlines, try to understand from a scholarly and academic perspective the different forces that shape our world. Oftentimes, over the course of the year, we try to prioritize issues that are part of our mandate at the center, which is to explore issues of interest for the Muslim world at large and international politics. So I welcome all of you to our webinar. This webinar is titled Afghanistan in Transition, the Prospects of an Inclusive Peace. Everybody, I'm sure, has been following the events that have been unfolding before all of us. I'm sure it's very hard to make any kind of predictions about the future, but at the same time, there has been a lot of information, misinformation, truth and post-truth in the media. And as experts of international relations, we would like to get a bit of background for those who are unfamiliar with the issue. I am joined today by my co-host, Yasemin Saib, who is also a professor and a doctor at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. She is a specialist in Islamic studies and the study of religion. She also teaches courses on Islamic history and civilization at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. I'll allow Dr. Yasemin to introduce our first guest because we have a number of panelists that are waiting to speak. I want to, before I hand it over to Dr. Yasemin, I wanted to remind all of our viewers online that on our Facebook Live page, you can participate by sending your questions. And we have our technical team that is assigned to forward those questions to me and Dr. Yasemin, and we will, in due time, try to include them to the panelists. But I would like to ask for forgiveness from everybody that maybe because of the amount of questions, we may not get to your question, but that does not mean that your question is not important. It's just that, you know, there's a lot of sometimes questions that have come before yours. Dr. Yasemin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Awais, for that for that introduction. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of the panelists. I would like to first invite the first speaker for tonight, Professor Muhammad Haroon Khatibi, who is a professor at Salam University in Afghanistan. I'll remind you, Professor, that you will have approximately 15 minutes to offer us your presentation. We will leave the question and answer to later on during the discussion period. So without further ado, we look forward to hearing from you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. First of all, let me thank the CIGA Center for Islamic and Global Affairs and Sabahattin Zaim University for inviting me to this panel, which is about Afghanistan in transition, the prospects of an inclusive peace. And let me also congratulate the Ummah, Muslim Ummah, and Afghan nation especially, and the Taliban Islamic movement to the great victory against the American Crusade War in Afghanistan. This Crusade War was announced by President Bush after the 9/11 attacks in America. And the war was in the warriors, they invaded Afghanistan. And this Crusade War is, in the real meaning of the term, it had two sides and two fronts. They fought Afghanistan. One was the military front, which United States of America, with the help of NATO and other allies, they occupied Afghanistan for the last 20 years. And they used the most sophisticated weapons and the mother bomb, and so far to crush our nation and to crush the Ummah in this part of the world. The second front was with the soft forces, media and education and all those other things. They wanted to, we call it like a cultural invasion. They tried to de-Islamize Afghanistan. And from the day first, they started with their media, defaming Islam, attacking the Muslim, defaming invading the beliefs of the nation. So in both fronts, American Crusade War was defeated, alhamdulillah, and I would like to congratulate the Ummah for this defeat. And I would like someone to, if they could go to France and to the grave of French General Garoud, who went to the grave of Salahuddin and he said, "Wake up, Salahuddin, we are here." And give him the glad tidings of their defeat too. The defeat which all the Western leaders, they are admitting, including Joe Biden and French leader and all the others. Therefore, I think it is important to all of us to once again look at Afghanistan and look at what's happening, despite any other negative things which will come or we could see in Afghanistan. And occupation forces left Afghanistan in 13 of August 2021 with complete destruction and politically, economically, and socially. Americans, USA troops, they showed their real face to Afghan people, who they were claimed in the last 20 years that we are your friends. We are here to build a good governance in Afghanistan. We are here to build the reconstruction of the country. And they were claiming that here, but they showed their real face by leaving Afghanistan in a very bad situation, destroying and damaging everything what they had, what it was there. If it was military equipments or civilian properties, as we noticed in the Hamid Karzai's International Airport. I'm sure everybody is aware of that. By this, Americans forces, the occupation forces, they wanted to hide their defeat in Afghanistan and revenge from a very civilian car which was stood in the aeroplane. But nevertheless, they cannot hide their defeat there. The collapse of the Kabul regime after Ashraf Ghani fled to Emirates left Afghanistan with a vacuum of power. Continues up till now. This caused uncertainty and fear amongst the Afghan people. Despite all damages done to the Afghanistan by the occupation forces and its puppet regime to create division amongst Afghan people, as I said, they work through their media and soft forces to divide the nation ethnically, which we are suffering now from that division and so forth. Despite all those, in the name of division, in the name of ethnicity and sectarianism, there is still a good opportunity through an inclusive peace to unite Afghan nations together, to unite Afghan nations again. The inclusive peace has to include all Afghan stakeholders in decision-making level, not only employment level. The new administration, although they announced we would give share to the other, we will include others in our government, in our decision making, but so far we didn't see any sign of that. So Afghanistan is a Muslim country with a multi-ethnic society of Pashtun, Tajik, Uzbek, Turkmen, Hazara, etc. The common ground in Afghanistan is Islam and the motherland. Afghanistan is the home to all these Afghans, all these ethnicities living in Afghanistan. It would not be fair if one could come and exclude one of these ethnicities by the name of any name. So this is, therefore, there is still that opportunity to bring all the people together. 99% of Afghan nation, they are Muslims. In the very hardest times, which the occupation forces, they tried to bring another regime in Afghanistan and name another regime, but that regime was still named Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. That shows that the people, they would not accept any type of governance in Afghanistan except Islam. So that is our common group. And the new administration also wants to rule Afghanistan in the name of Islam. And evidence shows that a peace process that are more inclusive have a better chance of success.
Okay.
My time is done?
No, you still have a few more minutes if you wish to continue, Professor.
Okay. Inclusion does not mean giving everyone a seat at the negotiating table. It does mean creating opportunities for people with a stake in lasting peace to shape it. The main success of the nation could be easily addressed through consultation and inclusion peace. For example, taking the nation into confidence by having an inclusive government where all Afghans are fairly represented. It is time to all to call upon the a representative shura, a consultative gathering, which we call it JIRGA, to discuss the new constitution of Afghanistan, as there is power vacuum so far, and we don't have anything. We don't know. The people are uncertain about their future. So this is a very good time for such a gathering to discuss the issues of constitution. Steps should be taken to trust building among the Afghan nation and for a sustainable peace process.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can keep going if you want to. You still have some time, but you don't have to if you're done. Okay. It's up to you.
In order to just the few points I've got to make, in order to achieve a durable, inclusive peace, I believe the following should be considered by the new administration. As we know, the root cause of people's worries is uncertainty about what is to happen. The people lives in a state of uncertainty. The new administration can remove these causes by accelerating establishment of the government institutions, the new or interim constitution. Any delay would cause more uncertainty amongst the people. Announcement of the government at the early possible time. So far, we don't have the government is not announced, and the people, they don't know the ministries or closed, and nobody knows what is happening. The Islamic Emirates of Taliban can solve the differences by negotiation rather than weapon or force. Re-establishment of the military, police and security forces with professionalism under the new administration. It is not advisable to leave about 300,000 personnel at the mercy of others to be used as a threat in the future. And the last point I would say, consultation and shura is something which Islam orders us, commands us. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. So for the leaders of the new administration is advised to consult and make shura with the Afghan people and Afghan leaders at all levels. So that would bring a good result for the future of Afghanistan. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for sharing your thoughts with us. I have personally noted down a number of questions, and I know that we have more questions coming in from the internet. I'll now turn it back to Owais to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Professor Khatibi, for your insightful comments. Our next speaker is Dr. Rasul Bakhsh Rais. He's a professor of political science at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. Professor Rasul, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. I thank CIGA and the university for giving me this privilege and honor to share my views on inclusive peace in Afghanistan. I look at the prospects of future peace by raising a number of questions and trying to answer those questions about the Taliban government that seems to be in the shaping. Their ideas about Afghanistan, their ideas about the world, their ideas about the neighborhood, and what is it that they plan for the reconstruction of Afghanistan. Second, I would like to look at the geopolitical landscape of the region and particularly the role of the neighboring states. What are their fears? What are their concerns? Where their interests converge, where they come into conflict, and what policies they may or they may not adopt, and how regional countries play an important role in the stability and instability in the order or disorder of Afghanistan. But I think the most critical element to look at in the emerging and evolving situation of Afghanistan is the role of the international community. When we talk about international community, the dominant influence is that of the United States and its allies. International institutions do work significantly under the influence of American hegemony. So we look at these three. I would like to look at these three set of factors. First, the Taliban, I think it is one of the greatest victories of national resistance in modern history. As Dr. Khatibi has pointed out very rightly, there was hardly any new weapon that was not used. There was hardly any new military doctrine which was not tested. There was hardly any new strategic lessons that were not applied to change the pattern of Afghan history. Americans and their allies entering Afghanistan in the beginning of new millennium and the new century, I'm sure were well aware of the fate of the British Empire when it fought two wars with Afghans and the Afghan-Soviet war, or Soviet-Afghan war, where the Western countries supported. I think those lessons were not lost to them, but there was a kind of a hubris that perhaps times they thought had changed and they will produce with the weapons, with the money, with the allies, and with the international support that they had garnered through incentives as well as through coercion, that they thought that this time around the outcome will be very different. But after 20 years, we saw the Taliban taking over in the same way. America receded, disappeared from Afghanistan as the Taliban had disappeared in 2001. So, you know, too much will be said, too much will be written about the resistance. How Taliban were able to defeat one of the greatest powers of modern times with the best of weapons, with unlimited amount of money, and with every manipulation through media and whatever means they had on their disposal. Now the questions are that how can they transform a resistance movement into an effective government of a country which has been completely destroyed culturally, institutionally, economically, and in terms of social cohesion and solidarity. Afghanistan until 1973 was a very different country, coherent, solid, peaceful, orderly, moving historically at its own pace. So a fractured society where ethnicities have become more salient, where regional warlords previously have been very powerful, and these were the regional warlords that the Americans had employed as their allies against the Taliban. So that is basically pitting one Afghan against another Afghan, dividing them by blood feuds. So the question is that how Taliban are going to rebuild, restructure, revive, rethink. Afghanistan today is very different from the one that Taliban had captured about 20 years back. Taliban had lost about 20 years back. International environment is very different. And through these wars, 3 or 4 cycles of wars, Afghanistan is very, very different society. When the Soviet Afghan war started, the population of Afghanistan was estimated to be between 15 and 18 million. Today, it is estimated between 38 and 40 million. There are internal refugees and displaced people. There are refugees almost in every country, about 3 million in Pakistan are more likely to come. How to reintegrate, how to heal wounds will require inclusive peace. That is the title of the seminar. And inclusive can be something very subjective, but in my view, making a system inclusive requires institutions and processes. Are Afghanistan's Taliban and other stakeholders in Afghanistan today willing to sit around the table to negotiate a future constitution, a future political system, a future political order where peaceful change can take place, legitimacy can be established? I think most significant thing that I can say about the Taliban, and the question that I can raise regarding that, is that that ideological regimes face tremendous problem of acceptance and recognition and legitimation. That is history. The Western world did not recognize Soviet Union until 1938-39, when they found a common enemy. China could not take a seat in the United Nations Security Council for 22 years. We see what is happening to Iran next door to Afghanistan. And Afghanistan today, with Taliban victory, is in much worse condition than any of them. So the question is whether it will be a degree of moderation, balance, and respect for international norms. But respect for international norms without sacrificing one's own national interests, own ideas about good society, own vision about how to reshape society. So there are other 57 or 58 Muslim countries as well. And I think Taliban can learn how Pakistan, how Egypt, how Turkey, how Iran, how other countries have made adjustments. Not, I'm saying compromising is something very strong, but actually reinterpretation of Islam in the context of modern times. A lot of people are raising very troubling questions whether the Taliban have changed are the same. I believe that Taliban are the same, should stay the same, but at the same time have to accept a pragmatic approach to Afghan politics, as well as a pragmatic approach to international relations. Here, pragmatism basically means that what is it that is likely to help Afghanistan to reconstruct itself and economy to revive itself and to get resolved. Second, I think set of issues relates to the regional countries. It is no secret that after the Soviet Union was defeated and there was a split among the Mujahideen factions, the regional countries played a great game of their own in Afghanistan. Along ethnic lines, along sectarian lines, along geopolitical lines, and had favorites. But this was, and this can be in future, as much a failure of Afghan leadership as it will be of the regional states. In my view, Afghanistan today is an opportunity for peace, opportunity for stability and order, opportunity for a regional outcome or a regional market, an opportunity for each one to benefit from inclusive peace in Afghanistan rather than to engage in strategic competition and destabilize Afghanistan and get destabilized as a result of that. A vacuum, power vacuum, and vacuum of the effectiveness of the government and rest of the state in Afghanistan will create spaces, empty spaces that will be filled by external factors, external actors, and that way the Afghanistan space can get used against the regional countries. I believe that the regional states, the neighbors of Afghanistan, do realize the risks and the dangers, the opportunities. More recently, we had the meeting of the directors or leaders of intelligence agencies of 8 neighboring countries of Afghanistan and Islamabad. So it is our hope, but much of it will depend on whether Afghan factions, Afghan stakeholders play in the hands of regional states or play among themselves for a good future, better future of Afghan people, Afghan nation, and Afghanistan itself. I don't think that anybody can dismiss the structural systemic compulsions. And that is the international order that we have to look at. And states, every state functions within the constraints and the limits of the opportunities of the existing international order. But those who have dominated and have written the script of international order, which is centered around the idea of American or Anglo-American and Western hegemony in many respects, they seem to have been wounded in Afghanistan. They were not able to get what they wanted to. And the way they got out of Afghanistan was worse and more humiliating than the way they did from CIGA half a century back. And the blood, the treasure, and what symbolizes the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, you can see it on the days in the middle of last month, August, that the world was watching. Here the question is that, will they be willing to allow Afghanistan to be a stable, prosperous, orderly, peaceful, unified country? Or they will ignite the forces of resistance against Afghanistan. I, like many other observers of Afghanistan and the regional issues, have been watching the Western media, the discussion, the debate, both print as well as electronic. I don't think that the signs are very optimistic. They may strangulate, they may squeeze, they may destabilize Taliban and create conditions of failure. Many states have collapsed not because of their own failures. They have collapsed because of external interventions. Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Libya, the Middle East, the entire Middle East is before us, Afghanistan itself. Right? So while there is a discussion and debate within the United States about what went wrong, but I don't think that they are going to forgive Pakistan or the Taliban. But here the limit is, the challenge is how to create an opportunity for yourself to exist in such a system which does not respect the principles of justice and fairness, but rather it is woven around the principle of power politics, is a big challenge for the Taliban. And again, what we are trying to remind the world, particularly the United States, what did you get out of quitting, leaving Afghanistan high and dry when you achieved your objectives of getting the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan, ending the Cold War in your favor? I mean, today it is a different situation, quit and leave. I mean, here the options for the West is that you engage and re-engage with Taliban, which are a reality. And they have proved by their actions that they can negotiate in good faith, can honor their commitments. But it was a remarkable scene that the world kept watching, and nobody would like to comment positively about that, that within a period of about 9-10 days, the United States of America, about 17 or 18 days, they evacuated more than 120,000-30,000 people, and the outer perimeter was managed, secured by the Taliban, and not a single bullet was fired. They honored their commitment. So what they are saying about human rights, about inclusivity, about women's participation and rights should be taken at face value. But look at the media and look at the statements, that what kind of interviews and what kind of people they are bringing in order to portray a very dark picture. So they're not looking at the whole Afghanistan, but rather picking up pieces here and there and then project an image of Afghanistan and that of Taliban. So I think it is a challenge. As it is a challenge for Taliban, it is equally a challenge for the international community, whether they would like to re-engage with the Taliban and assist the people of Afghanistan to rebuild their lives, rebuild their state and nation. So these are all big questions. I hope that I wish I could answer many of those questions. But I think my view is that of an optimist, that Afghanistan's people and Afghanistan's leaders, Afghanistan's faction will find a peace, and the world community should allow them to sit together, negotiate, and reach a much broader settlement and rebuild Afghanistan. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Rasool, for your comments. There are questions coming in. We will save that for the end. At this point, I think I should update our participants that Two of our participants couldn't make it. One of them, Mr. Engineer Shahab Liwal, because of technical difficulties, and another participant because of a personal emergency. In any case, that allows us to have a more focused discussion around the topic. I will now give it to my co-host, Dr. Yasemin, to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Rais. I'd like to invite to our discussion today the final speaker, who is the director for a Center for Islam and Global Affairs, Professor Dr. Sami Al-Arian, who is a household name now on a global scale. He is instrumental in contributing to great academic discussions on literally every part of the Islamic world. And so we're indebted to him for his magnificent contributions. So without further ado, Dr. Sami, please, let's hear your thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Yasemin, for your kind words, and thank you, Rais, for moderating this important session, and thank you for my colleagues, Dr. Khatibi and Dr. Rais, for their contributions. What I would like to speak about is the American side of this equation that's been going on now for over 20 years. As you know, after 1945, we had a new world order that was led by the United States. The United States was the only power standing after the end of the Second World War, and it was virtually the only country that wasn't devastated from the inside because of the World War. And it shaped the order of the post-Second World War, in which it was leading it. And of course, towards the late 1940s, early 1950s, there was stiff competition because of the rise of the Soviet Union also as a world power, particularly after they were able to obtain the nuclear bomb. And throughout the next 45 years, between 1945 and 1990, we witnessed what is referred to as the Cold War. And we had what is called a bipolar system. That is, you had two major powers in the world system, in the international order. And having two world powers, that means there is a strategic policy, grand strategy for the United States, which was to contain the rise and contain the Soviet Union and the rise or the expansion of the second polar in the world, which is the Soviet Union. And that, of course, took place on many scales. There was no hot war because of the existence and presence of the nuclear weapons, but there was other proxy wars, particularly in Korea, and which was between 1950-53, and then in Vietnam, in which there was a major defeat of the United States. The Vietnamese of the Viet Cong, they were supported not only by the Soviet Union, but also by China, which ended with the withdrawal, humiliating withdrawal of the United States in 1975. Nevertheless, the United States was still the major world power, and it was certainly driving much of the world's institutions, whether it's political or military alliances or economic institutions. Eventually, the Soviet Union had its own Vietnam, so to speak, when they invaded Afghanistan, which is termed the graveyard of empires, as it happened in the 19th century, twice against the British, and in the 1980s against the Soviet Union. For 10 years, the Afghan Mujahideen were fighting the Soviet Union, and they bled it to the point where it contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union towards the 1980s, in which we started having a world order that was shaped basically in the early 90s with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the disintegration of the former Soviet Union into 15 independent republics. Of course, Russia inherited the nuclear arsenal of the Soviet Union, but it was still a much diminished way. And the United States, since 1990, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, became a unipolar, what geopoliticians, geostrategists would call the unipolar moment. And when you have a unipolar moment, which remained until approximately 3-4 years ago, 2016, 2017, that power has more space to go through adventures, to do certain things which normally, when you have a multipolar system or a bipolar system, they wouldn't do. And part of that would be to venture into many wars and many confrontations without fear of real containment or pressure or response from other great powers. And certainly 9/11 was a watershed moment. What happened is that when this happened, which had shaken the United States to the core, the United States was never outside in the continental United States was never really attacked. I mean, yes, they were attacked back at Pearl Harbor in 1941 by the Japanese Navy, but this was in Hawaii. This was in the Pacific. But this was the first time that they felt threatened, when they were attacked in the heart, not only of the financial market, but also in the halls of power, in the Pentagon, and other places. So the leaders of the United States had to answer the question, why were we attacked? There were two possible answers to this question. First is that the United States was attacked because of its policies. We can cite many policies that people across the world, particularly the Muslim world, would cite. The United States, since the first Gulf War, occupied the birthplace of Islam in Saudi Arabia. Yes, they were invited by the Saudis, by the royal family, but many Muslims around the world thought that this was desecration of the land, and they took offense of having foreign troops landing at the heart of the Muslim world. Another policy had to do with the sanctions during the 1990s against Iraq, where 500,000 people were killed, many of them children. And when the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, was asked if this was worth it, she said, yes, it was worth it, because they were concerned about the rise of Iraqi power, and they had really no concern about the people of Iraq, who would suffer tremendously. And of course, a lot of Muslims felt offended because of that, where Muslim lives meant very little, if anything. Another policy had to do with the support to Israel by the United States to the tune of over $200 billion over a half century. By that time, over 40 years, whether it was the military hardware that they were given to occupy Palestinians and subjugate them, or supporting them and shielding them in the United Nations, in the Security Council, over 46 vetoes throughout the years, whether it was a Republican or Democratic administrations, it doesn't matter. Whether they were shielding them in other international institutions, covering their crimes, and so on and so forth, complete support for the Zionist regime in a way that offended many across the world. Of course, another one would be the support of dictatorships, totalitarian regimes across the Muslim world, particularly in the Arab world, where America's client states were ruthless, brutal regimes that did not allow any kind of democratic transitions, democratic rule, any kind of human rights. The human rights violations were atrocious, and all of them were looked at as being basically client states of the United States. All these policies and others, of course, offended many people. And if the United States, regardless, I mean, no one is going to condone killing innocent civilians during 9/11, and certainly I was there at the time, and no one condoned it. I'm speaking about whether it was Muslims in America, whether Muslims outside. Many people actually condemned this. Most Islamic movements also came out against it. But the point is that they still had to answer, regardless of what the other side was, whether the United States was attacked because of its policies or because of another reason. And because you know, the other answer that was given by, at the time, George Bush, and the Bush administration, the president at the time, he said, we were attacked because they hate us. This is something that Trump used to repeat all the time. It's because of our freedoms, because of our democracy. And if they attacked us because of who we are, and we can't change who we are, then we have to go and change who they are. That was the rationale. And of course, that administration was full of neocons who were looking to, at this unipolar moment, to reshape the world order. Many of them also were Zionists and were keen on changing many of the regimes that they thought may be threatening to the Zionist state, to Israel. So they had this plan is going and changing many regimes across the Muslim world, which of course was ridiculous. But anyway, it was a policy that they enjoyed because, again, they really didn't have any other power to worry about because they were the only power that mattered in the world international system. So they came across, you know, they thought that they're going to go to Afghanistan and then to Iraq, and then from there to Syria, Somalia, Libya, Iran, the whole 9 yards, that they're going to change all these regimes and reshape the Middle East through these kind of policies. But at worst, what they're going to do is to impose new regimes, that these regimes, at least they will be rivals also to each other. So the first confrontation was in Afghanistan, and within 6 weeks, the Taliban rule was gone. And they thought, oh, how easy it was. They didn't even have to introduce much ground troops. And then, you know, their sight was on Iraq. Within a year, they started the second war in 2003. Of course, they were done in December 2001 with the Taliban. And then by March of 2003, they marched into Iraq. And within a month, that regime also fell. And they started engineering, basically, social engineering throughout Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, with all that, you could see that what they did not realize is how strong the feeling of independence and self-determination and not being a tool and client of a foreign power that ran both in Iraq as well as in Afghanistan. The Taliban was able to regroup itself and put together a resistance movement. And I remember at the time what Mullah Omar said, when he was asked a question by a journalist, and he said, we were promised by Allah victory, and the President of the United States is promising us defeat. We will see which promise would be kept. And I guess that question was answered last month. The Taliban was insisting on continuing their resistance. They did not care about any other thing except to rid their country from occupation. They looked at the American invasion and the American presence simply as occupation. We listened and saw the President of the United States, Joseph Biden, describing that as being miscalculation, as being a mistaken policy that did not have any strategic meaning to the United States. He said that the reason that we went there is because of Al-Qaeda. We got rid of Al-Qaeda in a couple of weeks. We got rid of Osama bin Laden back 10 years ago this year, over 10 years ago. And yet we stayed there for no real strategic reason. Now, of course, he's trying to justify that, his withdrawal to the American people, but indeed that is the case that he's making now. This is rewriting history, because that's not what they used to say in the past. But the United States realized that its invasion and occupation of Afghanistan was doomed. They discovered that over a decade ago. I remember Obama, when he took office, he started asking his military generals what they were doing in Afghanistan. They didn't want to admit defeat, so they had the surge of 30,000 people hoping to pacify the resistance, that is the Taliban, and then hand it over to their clients, in which it was established first with Karzai and then Ashraf Ghani and so on and so forth. But of course, again, they missed the point. And the point was that the Afghani people, whether they belong to Taliban or not, they would not allow their future to be dictated by foreigners. That has been proven time and again. And there is something to be learned also from the Taliban experience. I believe there are at least 4 lessons that could be instrumental and instructive, particularly to resistance movements, whether it's in Palestine, in Kashmir, or wherever it is. First is that you really have to be strong for the other side to take you seriously and start negotiating with you. If the Taliban have thrown out their arms and they didn't resist the occupation, they would never have been part of any negotiations. They have just been part of the political group that can easily be pacified. So the fact that they were insisting on resistance and not allowing foreign troops on their soil, that is a great lesson to be learned. I mean, of course, when you look at the Palestinian situation, everything I'm going to say about what the Taliban did, the Palestinian Authority did exactly the opposite. They gave up any semblance of armed resistance, in which they were never really taken seriously in terms on the negotiating table by the Israelis. So it's very important that you do not give up the power that you possess and think that somehow the other side is going to recognize you and give you your rights. The second is that when you negotiate, you do not negotiate inside a country that is occupied. The same thing the Vietnamese did. The Vietnamese, when they were negotiating with the Americans, they went to Paris to negotiate. They didn't negotiate in Vietnam. Similarly, the Taliban were negotiating in Doha, because you cannot negotiate when your country is being occupied inside the country by those who call the shots. The third lesson, which is very important, is that you do not allow mediations. You do not allow people to mediate, or mediators, or third parties. And this is very important, because what happens is that when there is an imbalance of power, and you have some friends in the world in which you can trust, those friends, because the other side is a great power, they will be under tremendous pressure to pressure you. And you don't want to lose your relationship with the third party. So it's better that you negotiate face to face with your adversary, and not to allow a third party to be part of that of these negotiations. And of course, in that case, you can maintain your line, you can maintain your position without compromising your principles, and without having to face pressure from your friends or from mediators. The fourth lesson that is very important that we learn is that you do not negotiate on matters of sovereignty. The Taliban never negotiating about the form of government, or about who will or wouldn't, or what happened or wouldn't happen in the future of Afghanistan. The only thing they were negotiating is withdrawal, is how to end the occupation. And this is very important, unlike the Palestinians, when the Israelis negotiate every single aspect in relation to the Palestinians, even including what books they will allow or not allow in their schools, what kind of curriculum, and all kinds of other sovereign issues. And here you could see that the only thing the Taliban were willing to negotiate was how to end this occupation, for the Americans to withdraw. So I think these are very instructive lessons in political negotiation that other resistance movements must take into account. Now the hard part starts. After the end of occupation, yes, that's a great achievement from an Afghani point of view, from a Taliban point of view, from the point of view of those who support resistance against foreign occupations. That's a great achievement, a great feat, but that could also be the start of another phase that is probably more challenging than the phase that preceded it. There are many challenges that the Taliban face, and unless they take great precaution in how to face these challenges, this victory, great victory from the Afghani point of view, could unravel. There is a challenge, of course, of governance. I mean, some of my colleagues refer to some of these challenges. You know, the challenges in which the way they will handle, you know, Afghanistan is multiple ethnicities, perhaps 12 or 14 different ethnicities, you know, obviously with different compositions and different concentrations in different part of the country. And you can't have one ethnicity taking over. And of course, the Taliban is overwhelmingly Pashtun, and they would have to earn the trust of the other ethnicities to be able to keep the country together. And keep in mind also that the enemies of Afghanistan don't want Afghanistan to be united, don't want Afghanistan to be stable, don't want Afghanistan to prosper. They don't want Afghanistan to start on a path of development and progress. So that's going to be a tricky thing to do, is to be able to keep it intact and at peace. Even at the first time when the Soviet Union had to withdraw, we saw continuous factions fighting each other, whether it's with the north, the south, the middle, and also Afghanistan. You know, Taliban, they just had their victory and they were not, they didn't have much experience in governance. But I think now there is no excuse, and we can't repeat the mistakes of the past, and that we need to come together and find a common path and a common future for all the different. And no one's going to dispute what the constitution is going to be based on. I think that is not a point of contention. What it is how we can keep Afghanistan independent, but also looking forward and inclusive. That would include all the different factions based on their common history and common future. Of course, the challenge of foreign interference is going to be amongst the greatest challenges, because as I said, there are many forces that don't like Afghanistan to be in a situation where it can play a positive role and grow, particularly amongst different neighbors of Afghanistan. So they would really have to, first of all, unite the country. And with that, the ones who hold the most power should be the one who will concede the most. In many instances, the opposite happens. The one that thinks, if I have the most power, then those who are powerless or weak would have to concede. But I think the better way would be the one who has the more power should be the one that will give, because even though they may concede at face value certain things, because they hold the power, they will be looked at more as the ones who were magnanimous in trying to put the country together. And I believe that the people understand that, and hopefully they will move forward. Also on the issue of Islam and governance, it is very important that this time around, they don't miss the chance of proving that Islam is capable of offering a non-corrupt government and a system and a paradigm that the people could be proud of, not something that could be, and I'm not obviously excusing the media campaigns that's going to come and try to distort anything that is Islamic. Nevertheless, Afghanistan now is the only country in the Sunni world that I believe will try to say or claim that they are ruling with Islamic principles. And it's very important that that part is held to the highest levels without going to extremes, because that is the example. They can set the example for the other governments, for our societies. The issue of social justice, the issue of, I understand they are very strong on moral values and trying to rid society of corrupt practices, the opium pandemics and so on and so forth. But it's also important that we go to the real issues that people care about, not just on the moral ground, but also on their lively needs, social justice, the economic needs, the social needs, as well as a political system that people could feel that they are inclusive, that they are being included, and that they are part of a system that they are proud of. Now, there are going to be a lot of talk about women's rights, about, of course, children's rights, human rights, and so on and so forth. And we really have to deal with these issues in a very delicate way because of the whole world is on Afghanistan today. I don't buy, of course, that the West for a moment cares about human rights or women's rights in Afghanistan. Why do I say that? Because we saw in dozens and dozens of examples where they were shooting drones. They were shooting at weddings where women were the most people killed. They were shooting at places where children were in the playground, and they didn't care that dozens of children were there and dozens died. And the last act, if I may conclude with this, the last act that the American government did before they left, which was on the 29th of August, after the Daesh, the ISIS operation in which 13 Americans and dozens of Afghans died, and they wanted to take revenge. So what did they do? They were tracking a person that they linked to a what they called a safe house, and that safe house was linked to ISIS. And they went and tracking that person for 8 hours in a row, in which he had to go to 4 different houses, and they were suspicious of these houses. And then eventually he went to a building. They were not able to identify this building, but they thought this building was suspicious. And then they saw him opening his trunk and putting some stuff inside the trunk. And their conclusion, somebody probably sitting in North Dakota was making these decisions, and they thought that these were explosives. And then he went back through the same route and he visited these 4 houses that they were suspicious until he went to a house. And then when he entered the house, they thought that, okay, this guy is probably linked to ISIS, since the first house that he visited was linked to ISIS. And therefore they looked and they found only one person next to him, and they made the determination, let's bomb this guy. He is an ISIS operative. We can take revenge. Now, we learned later that there were other people killed. The next day, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the highest military officer in the United States, said that this was, quote unquote, a righteous act. This righteous act had 3 other civilians, according to him, but these civilians did not die from the drone attack, but they died because what was in the car was explosives, and that this secondary explosions that came from the car killed the other 3 civilians, and that they prevented a larger calamity. That was the claim. Now, both the Washington Post and the New York Times investigated this in full. And what I'm about to tell you is emblematic, is similar to the dozens and hundreds of other attacks that the United States did throughout Afghanistan for the past 20 years with all the different claims. It turned out that this person that was killed was actually a person who was working for American charity. He was friendly to the Americans. He applied to the resettlement program in which he wanted to bring himself and his family to America. He was working for a charitable organization, American one in California, that was trying to feed Afghani children. That morning, he was asked by his boss to go to the boss's house to pick up his laptop. That house, in which his boss was also very friendly to the Americans, was deemed by somebody sitting in some military base as being linked to ISIS. He picked up that laptop, then he had to pick up the car that he was driving was the company's car, wasn't even his car. So he had to pick up every morning 4 of his colleagues from their houses. The building that they were not sure, but they suspected was another ISIS building, was the headquarters of that company that he worked at. The things that he put in his trunk were 4 jugs of water, because after the Taliban and after the chaos that took place, there was no longer water. So he would go to his work, fill jugs of water so he can take it back home. After
Sami, we're running out of time.
1 minute. Then after that, he came back to his house. And usually when he comes back, all the children, 4 families living there, all the children come to him. And when they decided to bomb him, to drone him, 7 children were killed, including 2 of his brothers and 1 of his cousin, in addition to his cousin and his brother. 10 people were killed, including 7 children. And this was a righteous act. This summarizes the whole endeavor, the whole experience of what happened in Afghanistan. Thank God it's over. And let's hope that the future of Afghanistan will be much brighter than what has been taking place in the past 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, for your very insightful thoughts. Now we'd like to open it up for discussion. Always, if you don't mind, I'd like to pose the first question to Professor Khatibi. But actually, I thought we were going to break for prayer.
Dr. Yasemin, why don't we take a few minutes to take a break for Salatul Maghrib, because the timing will make us miss Isha. So if we could take a few minutes for Salatul Maghrib, we'll be back in, let's say, 5 minutes. So if everybody could turn off their microphones and shut off their cameras, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yasemin, you can go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make sure that Professor Khatibi is back, because I was going to address the first question to him. However, if he is not back, then we can address other questions to other people, or we can just have a general discussion where anybody can really answer the question. Let me just go ahead and pose this. Today, there was an article in Foreign Policy. The title of that article, "In Afghanistan, It's Back to the Future of Taliban Tyranny. A government of mullahs and terrorists snuffs out freedoms despite talk of inclusion and human rights." It's obviously a very telling title. I'm sure we don't need to read anymore for us to be able to ascertain what that article is about. So my question really initially to Dr. Khatibi, although any of you can really address this question, would be, you know, the 33 the cabinet members, the interim cabinet members now are almost inclusive. You know, they're talking about inclusivity, but they're really all Taliban members. They're all Pashtun, I think, or mostly Pashtun, and they're definitely all male. So I understand it's very nice to talk about peaceful inclusion, but is that really the reality of what Taliban can offer, or can at least lay the foundation for in Afghanistan? Is that something that we can hope for realistically?
Okay. Yes, that is true, what is there in the new cabinet, but this is a caretaker cabinet. The same question was posed to the Taliban spokesperson, and he said this is a caretaker, is an emergency type of government. It's a caretaker government, and they would take care of inclusivity in the next government which would come. But we don't know. We hope this is what I think this is one of those mistakes which was done previously, and Dr. Sami Al-Arian also hope that they mustn't repeat the same mistakes. This was what I knew about the thing, and we hope in Afghanistan that at least at this time also some amendments should come to the to this cabinet before they announce it officially. That would be a better point or a better point to start for a peace building mission. Thank
you. I may say something about this, if I may.
I'm just before you answer, Dr. Sami, I just want to ask one just related question that you may also be addressed. I'm just curious, and I don't want to make this a women's issue. I get that there's about 1 million other issues that are far more important, but why would the Ministry of Women's Affairs be abolished as soon as the new interim government has been formed? I mean, what would be the advantage of doing that?
Well, let me just address the issue of what happens after revolutions, after civil wars happen. So this is what people usually do not see, or they do not put it front and center. What you have, you had 20 years of occupation. You had governments that many Afghanis thought that these were corrupt, unrepresentative governments as well. It's not like this was democratically elected, embraced by all Afghanis. A lot of people thought that these were governments that were serving the occupation. Whether you agree or not agree, there was a an insurgency, there was other people, you may call them revolutionary, you may call them resistance movements, whatever it is, you have a new regime. Now, when a new regime takes over, regardless whether it's the Taliban, Islamist, communist, socialist, American Revolution, whatever it was, they haven't established the rapport, the trust with other political forces. So the first order of business, when you have this, revolution, this transition of power, is that you have to make sure that you hold on to this power, that this achievement after 20 years doesn't go away. So usually you're going to put your own people in charge until you figure out what's going on, until you consolidate your power. And then you need to establish trust. Whom do you trust? If the Taliban was a movement that is basically Pashtun based, they can't just go and embrace others and think that these people will be loyal to them. That doesn't happen. I mean, this is not reality. I think the United States, when they first appointed a woman as a cabinet secretary, was maybe after 200 years of its existence. So for them to think that somehow, this is what we're going to embrace liberal democracy once you demand it is fanciful. It's nonsense. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have to allow the victors some transition so that they can go from one state to another. What would not be acceptable is this to be the permanent situation. But I can understand that when revolutions win, when resistance movements win, at the first order of business is to consolidate power and to make sure that you have a peaceful transfer of power. That cannot happen with forces that you do not trust, because there will be breakdown of communication and quickly things will descend into chaos. So that should be understood, and they should be given some time. And they said, this is a caretaker government. And I take them at their face value that this is something they had to do to make sure that the people in charge now are people who are trusted, and that eventually they have to figure out who their allies would be and then where they can. Now it depends what kind of political system we're going to have. This could be something that would be unacceptable to all of us, or could be something that could be acceptable. Let's wait and see.
Dr. Yasemin, did you have anything else to add?
I have a lot of questions here that are that I have on my list, but go ahead, Owais, if you have something you'd like to.
On the question of women participation, just recently there was an article by Adnan Gopal in the New Yorker, I'm sure you have read it, called "The Other Afghan Woman," especially focused on the 75% or more of the Afghan population that lives in the rural parts of Afghanistan. And the experience of most of the narratives that he captures, mainly from the Helmand province, is one of devastation, one of destruction, and one of insecurity. And so what we have are competing narratives about progress over the last 20 years. When we talk about woman, as if the Afghan woman is a singular, we have to be careful in being nuanced enough to understand that people experience the war in many different shades around Afghanistan. And one of the statistics, and there are some statistics I want to read off as we move into asking these questions, because some of the facts are always lost in a lot of the propaganda as the events unfold. Brookings Institute in 2020 did something called the Afghan Index, where they asked a number of questions and surveys. Amongst one of the most particular one on this point is they asked, what is your assessment of your household's health and well-being? And over 75% of Afghans answered in 2019 that over the course of 20 years, that their assessment of their household's health and well-being was either worse off or the same as it was in 2001. So what we have here is that women across Afghanistan have not experienced the war in the same way. So while it's true that, what we hear, the statistics that women were enrollment in universities had increased over 2022, but there's another Afghanistan that doesn't see the light of day. 1 million Afghans lost and killed. According to a UN estimate, for instance, in 2001, the opium trade in Afghanistan had gone from 8,000 hectares, which was almost eradicated under the Taliban, to 350,000 hectares of opium under the American occupation, right? Other statistics are that we talk about freedom of press. Right now in the Western media, there's a lot of talk about the freedom of press. But if you look at the statistics of where Afghanistan ranked under the American occupation, ranked 121 out of 180 countries as far as freedom of press is concerned, 173 out of 198 countries as far as corruption is concerned on the corruption index under the American occupation. Another statistic that jumped out at me was that the poverty rate in Afghanistan went from 34% to 55% under the American occupation. And one of the biggest problems that in 2018, Afghanis said that they're facing is insecurity. 73% of Afghanis answered the survey by saying that they felt insecure. So while a lot of talk has been made about the loss of the progress made, I think that these are old colonial tropes which show a pick and choose of certain aspects. And there's no denying that, female enrollment has gone up. There's no denying that, for instance, mobile phone usage has quadrupled or something since 2001. But this idea that there's progress under an occupation is something that's an old trope. And this is where I want to bring in Dr. Rasool to speak, because he spoke a little bit about this, about the relationship between the American occupation and occupations, colonial occupations from the past, and how the idea that an Islamic rule that is coming now comes only because modernity and progress was not palatable to the natives of Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, Rais. I think if we look at 20 years occupation and war, there are two categories of Afghans and there are two Afghanistans. The one category of Afghans are those who are with Americans for pragmatic reasons, opportunity, working with them. And some of them might have thought that now in the conditions that they found their country in, perhaps that could be the way out, personally for them, and for some, for the entire country. This was a minority. This was either the influential people from the periphery or the city dwellers. There was other Afghans in Afghanistan. The other Afghans were those who were in the resistance, who were with the Taliban, who wanted to see Americans out. There's an overwhelming number of these people, and mostly in the Pashtun areas. But not that other areas were spared. But taking the bombs on their heads, losing lives, losing animals, losing livelihood, losing family members. So this Afghan was Afghan, and Afghanistan was the subject of war. And the Afghan and Afghanistan and Herat, Kabul, and Mazar-e-Sharif and some other cities was a subject of reconstruction and war economy. So, you know, we have to look at not only what was Kabul and how Kabul changed, at least in the facade, but we have to look at the experience of other Afghans in Afghanistan. I think New Yorker's article that you mentioned, I've read it, that is quite telling. Women who have lost their relatives, everything, widows, mothers, sisters, right? The real head count has not yet taken place. And when it takes place, and the stories of atrocities, of torture, in the military camps, and also in the bases, particularly Bagram, when they are written by some Afghan historian someday, you will get another picture.
Yeah, I mean, there were many, sorry, Dr. Yasemin, I'll just say one last thing. In many of the reports that came from the rural sides of Afghanistan, we have stories of American soldiers raping women, you know, busting in houses, shooting people on the spot, hitting weddings. So my question is, when we talk about the progress of women, right, in a war zone, I think it's a very complicated issue. Even, I mean, given especially, you know, Edward Said's understanding of Orientalism and tropes and all of those included, I tend to give a skeptical eye towards the occupation's narrative of saving the brown woman, you know, at the hands of white soldiers. So this has been an old trope. I mean, this has been the case in India as well. I mean, when the British came, they're saving all brown women from their brown men. We like Dr. Rais has said, it's a very interesting observation that I think as wounds heal and as the archives and ethnographies come out, we will see a real picture of what happened in the last 20 years. I mean, we're talking about a country that was literally no press freedom under the American occupation. So we don't even know what was happening. We don't even have a proper census of the Afghan population, let alone, you know, how women development indexes are. In any case, Dr. Yasemin.
Yeah, you know, yeah, go ahead.
If I may add here some, I would like to say that sometime in the last few days, I saw a video or some posts on Facebook. It says there was a campaign about "Don't touch my dress," and they showed a woman with the colorful dress. It's true, that is Afghani dress, but Afghani dress, the real Afghani dress, has got a full scarf which covers everything. That is our custom. The Afghan custom of dress for many years is that they covered from men. That is Afghanistan. If you compare with some other country, is not the same like the thing. We have to respect those women who would like to cover themselves, would like to be separated in education, for example, from others. We would like to we should respect those people also, because that is the custom in Afghanistan. My university, we prepare, Salam University in Afghanistan, for a long time we prepared for the not co-education. since the time we started the university, we have got about 53% of our students are female students. And we paved the way for them, for the students to come if they like to study in any situation. And we noticed that the female students would rush to our university because the environment was a better educational environment for them. I say because the custom in Afghanistan is different from the custom in maybe some other country. We mustn't make mistake to say, for example, Kabul is all Afghanistan, or the big cities, the cities are all Afghanistan. No, these are the cities of Afghanistan. They are a very small portion of the Afghan population. Majority of Afghan population, they are in the outskirts of the cities or in the villages. As for the Women Ministry of Women Affairs, I would like to say, in fact, I am pro Women Ministry of Affairs or Ministry for Women Affairs, but that ministry, it should deal with the women issues. It would help the issues, the development of the women of the society. Unfortunately, the previous ministry, I'm from Kabul, we noticed that they were there to just push the women against the Afghan culture. Like say, for example, this Rola Ghani, the first lady of Ashraf Ghani's wife, he had a very big budget to pay to the girls to just walk without a scarf in the street if they can. And that would create difficulties for that person and for the others. So what to fight Islam? That was what I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, that there was a military front were fighting against Afghanistan in this war, and there was a culture invasion in Afghanistan. So we could see that thing. So what would you expect from such a ministry to keep it still? Or maybe there might be something in future. I don't know about that, what the Taliban, they will decide about that. But I was disappointed at the performance of this ministry. Just when Taliban, they came to Sima Samar, one of the well-known activists in Afghanistan, she spread a video, or she was encouraging the woman to go out and walk with no scarf, if you can. If you can't, just put your mask, but don't wear the black mask, because that black mask it looks like that burqa which the women wear in Afghanistan. So to this extent, they were encouraging the people against our own people in Afghanistan, against the Afghan culture. And I respect my own country and I respect my culture, and then they come in the name of Afghan culture and whatever is there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I had two really quick questions. I'd like to pose one to Professor Rasul and one to Dr. Sami, but anybody is welcome to address it. The first one, Professor Rasul, you did mention that, you know, in the neighboring countries now are playing their own game in the region with relation to Afghanistan. What do you think is the game Pakistan is playing? From some of the articles are suggesting that it's basically it's negotiating. Islamabad is negotiating a quid pro quo with the Taliban. to reject US bases in Pakistan and is asking the Taliban's assistance to combat its own, Taliban-style militants. Some have even labeled this a Tehriki Taliban situation. Is there any truth to this? What can you say about that? And then I'll just pose the second question, and then I'll stop. Meanwhile, Dr. Sami, we do focus a lot on the occupants or the occupation of Americans in Taliban. But as we know in a lot of different places, when US occupation leaves, the alternative is seldom any better. And so to this question, I'm wondering, who do you think would want to claim Afghanistan from the outside? Again, there are some articles suggesting that now Afghanistan and China are entering into their new quote unquote romance, is the exact word. And in fact, China is planning on making huge investments in Afghanistan. They're already started construction of a major motorway from their Jiansang to Afghanistan and all the way to Pakistan. Okay, so the US is gone. If China comes in, would that make things any better? Or maybe they will be a different kind of occupier than the United States was.
It's muted.
Dr. Rais, your mic is muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was raising a concern that whether or not the regional countries would cooperate to stabilize Afghanistan, as they happen to have common concerns about their own security. And if disorder and chaos comes back to Afghanistan, they will be adversely affected. So I was raising this question, but rather the signs are very positive. That Pakistan is talking to Russians, to Chinese, to Iranians, and to everyone neighboring Afghanistan, that how we can cooperate first to address humanitarian crisis, how to help Afghanistan in this critical situation. People need food, people need medicine, and on sustainable basis. And we are also talking about reconstruction, helping Afghanistan. So question I raised was whether Afghanistan will become a playground of great game among regional powers. Possibility remains. Much will depend on whether the regional countries take it as an opportunity to secure Afghanistan and secure their own borders and future. Are they engage Afghanistan for their own interests, but such kind of interests that come into conflict with the interest of Afghanistan and with other countries? About Pakistan, I don't think that Pakistan has any game plan. This time around, Pakistan has not shown any haste in recognizing the Taliban government. Informally, Qatar, Pakistan, China, Russia, so many other countries, China, Iran, and other neighboring countries are getting food, medical supplies, and whatever is needed. And we have opened up borders. Sometimes they are closed for trade. And we are asking the international community not to punish the people of Afghanistan for what has happened to the Americans. So no great game plan, but one thing is sure, that in the past, Pakistan's adversaries have used Afghanistan soil to promote terrorism in Pakistan. Today, in an interview with CNN, Prime Minister of Pakistan Imran Khan mentioned 3 groups, and they are well known. Baloch terrorists based in Afghanistan, the TTP terrorists based in Afghanistan, and Daesh, and the so-called Islamic State militants in Afghanistan. Indians in the past have used many of such elements to destabilize Pakistan. So we are concerned, and we will be working with the Taliban new government as we try to do it with the previous government and with the Americans, not with much success. So I think that is a legitimate concern of every neighboring country of Afghanistan, that its problems don't spill over to the neighboring countries and its soil is not used against other countries. This is what the Afghan Taliban are pledging themselves to, but that also depends on their capacity, that to what extent they can control such elements.
Thank you very much.
All right. As for your question about the rivalry between great powers and Afghanistan, certainly Afghanistan is in the middle of rivalry between different regional powers and great powers. Every power has a grand strategy. The grand strategy of the United States is to make sure that it maintains its primacy over the world order, that it is the #1 power, it's the one that's calling the shots, the one that's controlling the political, diplomatic, financial institutions, as well as the military alliances that maintain its power, particularly in 3 regions in the world. The Europe, but Europe really comes at #3, the Persian Gulf area, where the 65% of the oil passes through, and East Asia and Northeast Asia because of the rise of China. These are the areas that matter to the United States. And what the United States is concerned about is that with the rise of China, that China may surpass the United States militarily, in which it could bring that power down, or at least try to change a world order that will not be conducive to American interests. On the other hand, the grand strategy of China, and I try to tie this to Afghanistan, is to expand peacefully because it doesn't have the military power to challenge the United States in different regions in the world, particularly in its own region. So the US thinks that China's game plan is to establish hegemony in its region, and China's game plan is to dislodge the United States from that region so it could have a freer hand, particularly when you look at the Gulf of Malaga, where 80% of Chinese energy resources pass through, 64% of China's trade goes through, and the United States is in full control of that region. So it started a project to project its own soft power so that it could have this space of becoming not necessarily a global hegemonic power, but a great power nevertheless. This is what's called the Road and Belt Initiative. And Afghanistan features in that plan. Of course, Pakistan has been a beneficiary of this plan to the tune of billions of dollars. Now Iran is also, after they signed the agreement with China, they become beneficiaries in many other spheres, and of course, Turkey. So if Afghanistan becomes closer to China, that would be of concern to the United States, because the United States is trying to basically end that project as much as it can. But China, on the other hand, is trying and they were friendly to the Taliban, so they have the advantage here. So there will be a great rivalry between, of course, the United States vis-a-vis Taliban is not a friendly power because they were occupying Afghanistan, and we will see what happens. But China has not been coming with armies, with invasions, with military hardware, with boots on the ground. It has been coming with construction companies and with economic projects and expansions and loans and so on and so forth. But certainly it's not free either. I mean, with every aid that China brings, they would have, the other party would have to sign, and basically if they cannot deliver or they cannot pay it back, they might be selling part of their sovereignty. And that would be the great challenge to Taliban. How much could it maintain its own sovereignty over these? The other rivalry regional is between India and Pakistan, certainly. And I'm sure Dr. Rais would speak more to that. And of course, India is one of the losers with the rise of Taliban, and Pakistan is one of the gainers because of that strategic relationship, the strategic rivalry taking place in that part of the world, and what role Afghanistan could play. As far as Iran and Turkey are concerned, it remains to be seen. Certainly Taliban during its first phase was antagonistic towards Iran, and then they became friendlier. And we will see what would be in the future. And I think it's in the interest of both parties to maintain their good relations, and for the Taliban to accommodate the Hazaris, the Shiites of Afghanistan, who are about 18% of the population, and for Iran, if they think that they have a common adversary. As far as Turkey is concerned, it's going to depend, of course, on what kind of policy Turkey is going to pursue towards the Taliban. At the beginning, it was more like NATO policy. Now it's becoming a little bit more independent. And the more Turkey embraces Afghanistan as a country and embraces, construction projects, and again, another forms of soft power, and I think the more it will also give, as Qatar also is doing, more trust for the Taliban to engage the whole world, because they really have very little friends. So if Turkey and Qatar, as they are cooperating in maintaining or in running the Kabul airport, if they become closer to Taliban, that will soften also the rule of Taliban. It will become more inclusive. So just to summarize, Afghanistan has also a great wealth in terms of raw material and minerals, and there will be a lot of competition there. And I think that makes, of course, that great competition makes great challenges also. And we will see how Taliban or Afghanistan in general are going to deal with that.
Just on that note, really quickly, I'm sorry, I'll give you the platform, but because you mentioned Turkey, I was wondering, can we anticipate seeing more of Turkey's involvement in Afghanistan, in your opinion?
Absolutely, and I believe the Turks have many great interest in there. Remember, also part of Afghanistan, you have a little bit of Turkmen, and also you have a lot of countries around where you have lots of Turkmens. And Turkey has been very active in Central Asia. It's been one of the regions that they have been investing heavily in the past 20 years. And I could see also that if the relationship becomes warmer between the Taliban or between whoever the new rulers of Afghanistan and Turkey, and I think there will be more investment, Turkish investments. And of course, Turkey could also be the mediator between NATO, since Turkey is a NATO member, between the NATO allies who were the former occupiers of Afghanistan and the future Afghanistan. So I believe Turkey will be engaged, and they will continue to be a part of that. My hope is that Turkey is also not going to carry policies that are NATO-centric, but more into the interests of Afghanistan and Turkey and that part of the world.
Yeah, so we're coming to a close. We started 15 minutes late, so we'll just take 15 minutes over. We've got a couple more minutes, so I have one last question, and then I will let both Dr. Rasool and Dr. Sami make some concluding remarks if they so see fit. I wanted to bring the attention to both Dr. Rasool and Dr. Sami about commenting about the peculiar moment in which the Taliban have come to power. So from an Ummah perspective. So within the Ummah, up until 2011, it was almost a foregone conclusion that an anti-imperial stance in the Muslim world was a democratic stance. right? So if we are to confront imperial interests in the Muslim world, it means inculcating democratic institutions. Now, one of the strange phenomenon of the rise of the Taliban is that no one can question their anti-imperial credentials. Yet, we have a situation where an Islamic movement has explicitly rejected the models of Pakistan and Turkey, which were held up as functioning democratic republics, and negotiated the position of an emirate, which is, as has been the traditional position of Muslim movements in the Muslim world, a pro-imperialist position. So like in the Arab world, for instance, the Gulf monarchies, along with Morocco and other monarchical states, is considered a puppet form of government. How does the rise of the Taliban in this post-2011 context change the way Muslim actors trying to secure their own sovereignty? How does it change that calculation? Oh, and one more thing I'll say last is the question of Sharia law. So while Islamic movements around the Muslim world have rejected any appeal to Sharia law as a form of coming to power, the Taliban, on the other hand, has embraced Sharia law explicitly. So it seems the only successful anti-imperial model, which has full sovereignty at the moment, is one that is not democratic, that has embraced Sharia law, and rejects the model that was given by the Muslim Brotherhood, or by the AKP, or by even the Pakistani state.
Dr. Rasool is muted.
It is a very interesting question, the way you have raised it and you have framed it. But hidden in this question are many assumptions. Assumptions of similar conditions, similar backgrounds, similar cultures, similar political and conflict experiences. So I think it subsumes that similarity among the Ummah. Afghanistan is very different in terms of history of resistance. So we don't see only against Americans. We see a resistance in continuity from the time Soviets indirectly intervened, and I do believe that Soviet trained officers were behind and with, or encouraged or conspired with Sardar Dawood in 1973 to overthrow monarchy. So the resistance has a long history in Afghanistan. It is all foreigners. It is not just the Imperial West. It is not just America. It was the Soviet Union as well. Why they have succeeded and why a collapse happened, we have to look at the social structure of the society. Many of the agreements of surrender were negotiated through the elders, through the tribal chiefs. At the end of the day, Afghan army had to ask a question to themselves. What were they fighting for? Who they were fighting for? Against whom they were fighting? These were very difficult questions for them. And particularly, such situation of self-questioning happened when there were very clear signs that Americans are not going to be here anymore. And such a momentum was building since Doha Agreement of February 2020. So it is a very unique situation in Afghanistan, and which other countries you can replicate. You can replicate, we have replicated the anti-Soviet war model in Kashmir, and that continues there. I don't think that the last word in the history of the Palestinian struggle, or the history of the struggle of the Kashmiris for liberation against oppressor has been written. I don't think the history has come to an end when it comes to occupation of Palestine or occupation of Kashmir, and many other areas that we can discuss sometimes in future. I think against foreign occupiers, a resistance is legitimate. Charter of the United Nations, traditions of many countries around the world, including that of the United States itself. So what can be a war of liberation and independence for one cannot be a war of terror for another. So we will see such labeling and such kind of demonizing narratives against those whom they don't like. I think each situation, each country, each resistance will write its own script in the circumstances in which they launch themselves, they fight, and they liberate their countries. There can't be a universal template applicable to the entire Muslim world. But of course, resistance is something not unique to a Muslim nation, a nation's aroma. It is a universal concept.
Thank you, Dr. Rais.
Well, your question implicitly, I don't know if you do that, I don't think you do, but the question itself embraces the notion of liberal democracy and makes it the standard. And therefore, if anybody does not embrace liberal democracy, then they will be looked at with suspicion. The question here is liberal democracy the model or the paradigm that Muslim societies should embrace? Certainly, Islamic movements, particularly in Tunisia, Egypt, others, have embraced it because of the degree of secularization and modernity that has taken over their societies. And therefore, what they try to do is to change on the margins some of the features or characteristics of this liberal democracy embrace. They didn't really try to bring another model or paradigm by which they can present the main concepts that they, in political concepts or political paradigm that they're trying to embrace. But we have to know that liberal democracy was really a product of Western experience that came in the aftermath of the Westphalia nation-state system over, the Enlightenment era and the different transformations that Western societies had to go through until they reached, these political systems in which democracy, in their definition, is the best among bad options. But this is how we can negotiate our differences, because they embraced secularism and these separation of higher understanding and higher explanations of the big questions that we cannot really achieve a common understanding of these things. Therefore, we're going to put them aside and we're going to live together. And the best way to do that is through liberal democracy or liberal democratic institutions and systems. Now, the Muslim world did not necessarily go through the same experience. They went through a different experience. Part of that experience was to impose secularism and to impose the conceptions of modernity, including the conclusions of the liberal democratic systems on Muslim societies. Now, because of the pressure and the weaknesses of Muslim societies, reluctantly, some of the Islamic movements embrace them and they try to change them so that they can be accommodated according to Islamic principles. Part of the problems, of course, is that when you try to talk about Sharia in its traditional sense, there are some problems. There are some conflict that takes place and they haven't been able to resolve. And another problem, of course, is that secularism is so deep in some of these societies. In Tunisia, for example, to a degree among the elites in Egypt, not necessarily the people, but the elites themselves are very much secularized. So it's very difficult. And when you have institutions that manipulate power, such as the military in Egypt, then obviously you're outpowered. You can't really do much about it. So in Afghanistan, the social conditions are completely different. The degree of secularization is very thin. It's only among the elites, and these are very, very minor. They may have increased during the occupation period, but they are still isolated. Many of them left. Hundreds of thousands are about to leave Afghanistan. They will carry with them these notions. I'm not trying to condemn them or praise them. All I'm trying to do is to bring to your attention the explanation of what's going on. What we need to concentrate on, and I can say that there are excesses of what Taliban, in my view, what Taliban did earlier, is good governance. That's the standard, not necessarily liberal democracy. Good governance, what we call in Arabic al-hukm al-rashid, good governance in English they are called. And then we have to define what good governance is, that with the inclusive, the pluralism that has to be also embraced. The representative, that some among the society should not be felt that they are left out, they are excluded, and there are people who have monopoly on power. And what kind of system, these are just details, right? So what we have to, you can call it whatever you like. Now, the other problem that they have to obviously deal with is the problem of the application of Sharia, because Sharia by definition defines a citizen or a good citizen based on faith. But to the fortune of Afghanis is that you really don't have many non-Muslims there. So that is less of a problem than other areas. And you don't have many people also who embrace, let's say, atheism or other religions. But still, how do you apply Sharia is a contentious question that has to be dealt with. And therefore, we need to look at some of the recent studies that have been done now for decades about the higher purpose of Sharia and maqasid al-Sharia and its application. And there's a lot of ijtihad that has been done there where, but if you're going to rule by fiqh rather than ruling by the higher purpose of Sharia and try to have ijtihad as part and parcel of your modern day challenges. This is not about modernity, it's about modern day challenges, by which case you cannot simply just rule by fiqh, because fiqh means precedence. You're looking at what happened at one area and how I can take this and make analogy and qiyas, and I don't think this would apply. You need a new kind of understanding of how you apply Sharia, and with that you may have to embrace the higher purpose of Sharia and try to institute a new understanding of how Sharia in its with its higher purpose can make a difference in the lives of the people, instead of trying to rule by precedence and fiqh. And this is the narrow way by which I think I am afraid that some people look at the application of Sharia, that every question has been answered. All what we have to do is just adopt them. And even if there are some minor changes here and there, we can apply qiyas and we get it all done according to our madhab. This is a very closed way of ruling, and then people will feel excluded and they will feel that they are not part of the system. And that's what creates conflict. And that's what liberal democracy is trying to negotiate. And then what do? They exclude totally religion from, and with that probably moral values, and they go back to the instinct of a humanistic values by which they think that humanity can agree on these things, which of course to the Muslims it doesn't work.
Dr. Khatibi, do you have any closing remarks before we conclude the session?
That part of the questions, but what I could say about the collapse of the Afghan government, and with having about 300,000 military or security and military forces. That I would say the motives of war differs between the warriors on both sides. One side has got the religious motives of war for fighting, and he believes that if he goes there and he kills or he killed, he goes to Jannah, paradise. The other side, he's a person who fights. He doesn't have that motives of war. First of all, in Afghans and in the Indian subcontinent, to fight against a scholar, ulama, itself is a sin. It's considered as a sin. And then secondly, the Afghan army, it was an army which was paid by dollar. And that was not also very big. They would fight just to earn their the muscles of their day, or what they had for $300 or $400. So nobody is prepared to kill themselves for the $300 or $400 at one place. And the second thing, when the military and security forces, they looked at the corruption, amount of corruption at the military and security forces, they would not like to be killed because of the corruption of the elders. So this was one of the things. And the other thing, the same regarding the Islamic movement, and I think the war against the Soviet Union, jihad against the Soviet Union, that time it was led by the Islamic movement with the thing. But at the same time, they would have the thing. Okay, the failure, it was imposed on them from mostly from outside, and the inside, the infightings between the Mujahideen of that time.
Dr. Khatibi, I want to just ask for your clarification on one of that issue. What is the relationship with groups like Wahhabi groups or Daesh and Afghani culture and Afghani, interpretation of Islamic thought? Is there any relationship? That's because we hear this a lot in the media.
Yeah, there is not too much Daesh or ISIS groups in Afghanistan, because we have got a very small group of what you call it by others, the Salafi groups in Afghanistan. They are a very small portion of the government. But ISIS in Afghanistan, it was a production of Afghan intelligence service. In many areas, we could see Taliban, they fought against them, like in the bordering area with in Kama and some other places in the eastern province of Nangarhar. But when they were defeated, the government forces would come and rescue them from there. The same thing in the northern part of Afghanistan. The ISIS were defeated by Taliban at that time, and about 300 or more than 300 ISIS members, they were rescued by the government, and they said they surrendered themselves to the government. So in Afghanistan, actually, that is something, Daesh issue or ISIS issue. it was a production of intelligence service at that time, and a promotion of Americans. Americans, they wanted ISIS to be in the northern border of Afghanistan and be something like to be a threat to Russia and China and that side. So this is one of the causes where the Russia, they kept to support the Taliban against Daesh, and they got their relationship there. I think this is what I could add here. And again, I would like to thank the CIGA and university, especially Professor Sami Al-Arian. I didn't meet him at the first place. I would like to thank him for giving us this opportunity in choosing such important topic, and also Professor Rais, Rasul, Bakhsh Rais, and other participants, and Yasemin Saib. I would like to thank all of you for this great opportunity, giving us, not forgetting Mr. Uwais Khan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that we are now way over our allotted time, but this was such an important discussion and the first webinar over this semester. So I hope that our viewers and our participants indulge us a little bit. Dr. Rasool, would you like to say a last word before I conclude, or Dr. Sami? Is there anything that we are missing?
Well, I would like to thank you and Professor Yasemin and Professor Al-Arian, and also Professor Khatibi. It was a lively discussion. I think this is a conversation that all of us need to engage to understand Islamic movements, to understand resistance, to understand imperialism, and understand this forced westernization in Muslim societies. So this should be the beginning of conversation about Afghanistan. Situation is uncertain, unstable, and we pray that Afghans find a solution to their problems and they live a peaceful life. But this conversation, academic and policy-oriented, research-based, fact-based conversation is extremely important, and thank you for arranging this conversation and making me part of it. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sami?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rais. Thank you, Yasemin. Thank you, Dr. Khatibi, and thank you, Dr. Rais, for this very important discussion. I hope, inshallah, we will continue having other seminars to discuss this. I believe that we are going to have, for our conference on the Ummah, we have an annual Ummah conference. Dr. Rais was our guest a couple of years ago, was on civil military relations. Incidentally, that book is finished. It has been approved today, finally, by the publications committee after 2 months waiting. So it's going to be published next week, and it will be available to everyone. It's a very good book on civil military relations in several countries. But our plan for next year is to have a series of seminars in which we're going to examine the Islamic movement, politics, and governance. And one of these would be the Taliban sometime. It will be 9 different sessions. So in one of these would be the Taliban and other movements as well. So hopefully we'll revisit this issue again. And I hope, inshallah, to host many of our scholars that we have today in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Our next session is going to be in October. I invite all the participants to join us again. We'll circulate the flyers like we did this time a week or two before the seminar. I would like to personally thank Dr. Yasemin for her kind help in helping me host this seminar. Thank you very much for all the participants, and Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.